Hi. Today I will cover the going ons in the first semester, that is 1972 fall at Syracuse, in the Syracuse University. Firstly, I will go through how W.B. Heroy, Heroy's family, donated $1 million to Syracuse University to build an independent academic block for the Department of Geology, which functions as part of the Lyman Hall on the east side of the campus, east side of the campus. In the 20th century and in the early part, like in the 50s, Mr. William B. Heroy graduated with a BSc degree in geology, or a geology major, and entered into oil industry. Initially worked for the oil industry, and later he became himself an entrepreneur. And by being in the oil industry, Mr. Heroy created huge fortune, a huge fortune indeed. And of course, the children, the family is there to enjoy the fortune. But the children thought the best tribute they can create in the name of their father was to donate $1 million fund to the Syracuse University, where Mr. Heroy studied and earned a BSc degree in geology. So the money was transferred and a building was designed. It is a 3-story building with a basement and a sub-basement, like most of the buildings in the campus. See, one of the things that we miss that in our architectural design in India is the absence or lack of what is called basement or sub-basement. For some reason, the visionaries or visionary designers did not view the question of having a basement or sub-basement as an essential thing, because unfortunately, our minds are ruled even today by what is called the Raja culture. And that it so happens that only Maharajas and small, petty chiefs had what is called a cellar or a basement, like the West got it. So ordinary, average, middle class or upper class never could envision a home with a cellar. Well, anyway, for other reasons, or reasons of its own, the West, like Europe and Britain, as well as the Canada and United States, practically all government offices, commercial establishments, and residential developments had a cellar, or what you call as basement in their in their culture. So this building is a huge building. In fact, there is an auditorium of something like 250 seats. Then there is a foyer right above the auditorium, and which is the foyer has a ceiling which covers 2 stories high. And above the ceiling of the foyer, there is the Heroy library. And now the floor 1, or the so-called first floor, has 6 or 7 lab spaces. In other words, one of the most important sources of income to any department of study in the Western universities is from the introductory courses, whether it be physics or chemistry or geology or what have you. It is called 101. And that 101 course is actually taken by a few hundred students. Especially in the fall semester, the number can go as high as 300. And this is actually a big income to the concerned departments. When I was a student, the undergraduate tuition was somewhere around $60. And it means, if you have 300 students and they are taking a 3-credit introductory course, Geology 101, 1 credit hour rated at $60, it is $180 times 300 students. That's a huge amount of money. And in the Syracuse, being in the Ivy League group, charged a little more than what the State University of New York, in the state of New York, were charging. Cornell also had somewhere around $60 per credit hour. An undergraduate student needs to take 120 credit hours at the rate of $60 per hour in order to qualify for an undergraduate degree. Whereas the graduate students, those who go for MS or PhD, there is a tuition waiver. That means we don't pay tuition. Instead, the department finances the living expenses of the students in the form of a research assistant or a teaching assistant. There's a difference between a research assistant and a teaching assistant. Teaching assistants get paid only for 8 months, that is, during the fall semester and the spring semester. Whereas research assistants, they get paid for all the 12 months of the year. In other words, the so-called TAs, teaching assistants, will have to be looking around for some job somewhere in the town. Like for example, I had worked as a cook, okay, by all means, a cook in a hamburger stand, Carol's Hamburger, and I was paid $2.10 per hour of work as wages. That is the minimum wages in the state of New York, or rather in the whole country. And $2.15 is also the minimum wage for the typist or the secretary number 2 in the geology department. Only minimum wages are paid because they are only high school graduates. High school takes 12th class, a graduation in the 12th class, where students are taught in even secretarial work. So they can directly go, if they don't go to college for an undergraduate degree, they can directly go seek a job as a secretary in a company, in any kind of enterprise. And coming back to what is called William B. Heroy Geology Lab. Professor Daniel Merriam was appointed as the Jesse Page Professor of Geology in the Syracuse University Geology Department. This Jesse Page is also an endowment by a family whose, I would say, whose parents, he parent was a graduate in the geology department, went into oil industry, made a huge money, and then the family decided they will create an endowment in the name of the head of the family, and against which there will be a professor. And that first Jesse Page professor of geology in the Syracuse University was Professor Daniel Merriam, who joined the Syracuse University in 1971 spring. When Daniel Merriam came over to Syracuse, one thing also happened. Mr. Ghanshyam Srivastava and also moved over to Syracuse so that he can continue with his PhD work under Merriam in the Syracuse University. Then a strange thing happened in the same semester. Swapan Ghosh also landed in the Syracuse Geology Department as a research assistant with Professor Walter Dean, a young, dynamic assistant professor, very hardworking man, who is a PhD from the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. He is a geochemist, a low-temperature geochemist. He also had a stint in the University of Minnesota and as a postdoc. And in fact, Walter Dean, as we call him, Walter Dean was the youngest of the professors in the Syracuse University and an assistant professor only. And he was an undergraduate from Syracuse University. And the American system always will advise their own students, however brilliant they are, to get out of the undergrad from the university, to go and look for other universities in the country to do their masters or their PhDs. In other words, there is in India what is called inbreeding is so much prevalent. Inbreeding is never frowned upon by the UGC or by our academic system. Anyway, so Walter Dean came back to Syracuse, and that too also happened when the geology department shifted to the Heroy building. Because it all, okay, what about Chopin? Chopin and Ghanshyam were classmates in IIT-K and graduated in 1965. Chopin went to Presidency College, Calcutta to assist some professor, then enrolled for a PhD there and was working on. Whereas Ghanshyam Srivastava went back to his home in Lucknow, and then after looking for jobs around, jobs were very hard to get or come by. And then Ghanshyam went back to IIT-K and met Professor S.V.L.N. Rao and told him that he would want to go for a PhD with S.V.L.N. Rao in mathematical geology. And S.V.L.N. Rao, accepted Ghanshyam. And naturally, Ghanshyam went through the screening test and the Viva OC, the oral exam, and finally he was accepted. And, what had happened was in 1970, when I went over to the IIT-K to attend a winter course taught by Dr. Daniel Merriam, what had happened was Ghanshyam was not there. In fact, when the bridge between S.V.L.N. Rao and Daniel Merriam was inaugurated 2 or 3 years ago, the advantage was to Ghanshyam because Rao wanted Merriam to take or get Ghanshyam over to Kansas Geological Survey, where Daniel Merriam was working as a research assistant. So what had happened? Even without completing a PhD, Ghanshyam also went to Kansas State Geological Survey in the University of Kansas campus at Lawrence. And when Daniel Merriam shifted to Syracuse, Ghanshyam also came, whereas Chopin had a different route. Chopin went to University of Wisconsin, and for the first semester he had paid the tuition, but tuition he got a waiver, and in fact he had to pay money from his own pocket for boarding, lodging, etc. only for the first semester. From the second semester on, he had a complete coverage and as a TA. So he did a master's in low temperature geochemistry, especially about the geochemistry of iron in lake sediments in the lake, I think Lake Michigan. Anyway, because there was a professor who was interested in looking at the geochemistry of iron. So once the master's degree was completed, Chopin had to leave the university because the philosophy, go someplace else and do a PhD there. So what Chopin did was, Chopin was looking for a place, and he got accepted in Syracuse under Walter Dean. Walter Dean wanted him definitely a graduate student, because the first 5 years of appointment for as an assistant professor is a crucial period. It is on the basis of performance in research and teaching that a person gets acceptance and then tenure. That is the rule even today. So the first 5 years, almost all the assistant professors will work so hard, generating excellent results, so that even their own colleagues in the department will not vote against his acceptance by the university. So Chopin was the first research student to Walter Dean, under Walter Dean, registered for a PhD degree. Chopin worked on what is called the manganese nodules in the Lake Oneida in the neighborhood of Syracuse, not to the northeast of Syracuse. And of course, the interesting part is what is called the diving and snorkeling to collect samples of manganese nodules from the bottom of the lake was that act was by his own supervising director, Walter Dean, because if Chopin is put in water, he will hit the bottom in the next 10 seconds. Never knew how to swim. Still, the professor was kind enough to collect the samples, because what the reason is. Professor wanted a hard-working student also. Every hard-working professor would like to have a hard-working student, so that new ideas, new innovations can be produced. Of course, so that is the way Chopin and Gansham got reintroduced at the Syracuse University Geology Department. When I entered in 72 fall, these two guys were there, and that's how they came along with Ajit Da to receive me in the airport, etc., etc. Then one other thing that happened was the registration. Registration is a huge mela. And all the, roughly 20,000 students, that is 4,000, 3,500 to 4,000 students every year, that is coming in as a freshman. And the other 3 years, seniors, up to senior level, there will be roughly what is called 12 to 13,000 students. Then there will be something like 5,000 graduate students in the campus. Then there is an engineering college. Every year they accept something like 150 students. So it's a huge campus. In other words, when the campus is in, classes are in session, when the semester is in session, there will be a huge crowd of students walking back and forth from building to building, after a class, before a class, or going for a class. That is what happens in the American universities. That is the reason, exact reason, because of the huge student load, the departments start working at the first lecture will start at 8 o'clock, and the last class will end only at 10 o'clock. Can we imagine anything of this sort in our country? At least for namesake? Absolutely not, because we are used to some kind of a lazy, easy-going style of giving education, and also students learning about things. Well, we have to blame ourselves for whatever we have achieved and whatever we have not achieved. So that is how the campus worked. Tomorrow, our next episode will be another aspect of the campus life in Syracuse. Thank you.